War ruins lie across the old runway at mid-river, scarred concrete, faded numbers, wind holding its breath. They say it can become a runway for peace missions if someone keeps it from being erased tonight. The bulldozer idled like a low growl, a hot breath over cracked paint and weeds. Henry Cole stood with his boots on the chalky edge line, the old service coin warm in his palm. He rolled it once, listening past the engine to the faint USO jingle leaking from a worker's pocket radio. The air smelled of dust and rain that hadn't fallen yet. "Sir, we've got orders." The foreman called, hand on the rail. "We start cutting at the north end." "Hold a minute," Henry said. "That north end carried homecomings. You start there, you cut through names." "Names?" The man squinted. "It's concrete." "It was once a promise," Henry said, "and promises keep people upright." A younger worker shook his head. "We're on the clock." Henry turned the coin over. The etchings had faded, but he knew every nick. "I kept these seams tight in '75, he said, tapping the joint with his boot. "We scrubbed rubber on February mornings until our breath made clouds. They're still good under the ruin." The foreman leaned from the cab. "Look, I get nostalgia, but I've got a memo and a schedule." "What's the rush to bury what still breathes?" Henry asked. "Warehouse expansion," the foreman said. "We're behind." Henry walked closer to the blade and pointed toward the far lights. "You see that shimmer? It's not just heat. This strip is level within a hair even now. If you want boxes, fine. But don't pretend a memory's cheaper than asphalt." A worker laughed softly. "Memory doesn't pay rent. Sometimes it pays attention," Henry answered, "and attention saves more than rent." The radio crackled. A few bars of a crooner's chorus drifted through the dust. The wind lifted, then settled again as if listening. "Sir, please step back," the foreman said. "Safety perimeter." "I'm not here to make trouble," Henry said. "I'm here to ask for 24 hours. 24 hours for what?" "To measure, to map, to show you a way." "This doesn't just disappear," Henry said. "There's a group airlift folks talking about supply runs, medical boxes, training landings. People still need places to lift off. Peace missions." The younger worker tilted his hard hat. "Out of mid-river, if someone keeps it from being erased tonight," Henry said, and he heard his own words echo the wind. The foreman checked his watch. "Paper says we start. Paper says we finish by Thursday." "Paper says a lot," Henry said. "So does a runway." "Sir?" Henry exhaled and stepped back 2 paces. He let the coin fall from one knuckle to the next, the trick he learned in a long winter of waiting. The bulldozer's clutch clicked. Gravel popped. The blade inched forward until polished steel kissed the first line of faded numerals. "Last chance," the foreman called. "You want to talk to the town. Talk to the town. Not my machine." "I will," Henry said. "But give me 10 minutes. 5, the foreman said, rolling his wrist. Henry knelt and pressed his palm to the surface. The concrete was warm, the warmth of stored daylight. He could feel the brushed aggregate under his skin, millions of tiny stones locked in place by pressure and patience. He closed his eyes and saw red hats, canvas duffels, a chapel hymn slipping under the hangar door. He opened them to the sight of a spray-painted X where the cut line would start. "Listen," Henry said quietly, rising. "You ever stand somewhere and feel it hold you up, not because it has to, but because it was made for it?" The younger worker hesitated. "I guess. A porch sometimes. This is a porch for the sky," Henry said. "Clock's running," the foreman replied, but it had softened to weary rather than hard. Henry glanced at his own wristwatch. The tick was small, stubborn, steady. He put the coin away and pulled a battered notebook from his jacket. "Name's Henry Cole," he said. "I'll be at Dot's Diner in 20. Anybody wants coffee and drawings I'm buying?" Drawings of what the foreman asked. "Of how ruin can be runway again," Henry said. "Not for noise, for help." The radio's jingle cut to a clean guitar. The wind moved across the field, lifting dust in a low halo. Someone coughed. Someone else shuffled. The foreman looked at the blade, then at Henry, then at the long pale stripe reaching into evening. 5 minutes, he said at last. "Then we move." Henry nodded once. He tapped the concrete with his knuckles, a small courtesy, as if knocking on an old friend's door. He turned toward the access road, the watch ticking in his ear like a metronome for walking. He didn't look back. He felt the field look after him. Tomorrow they'll erase the last runway of my life. Dot's Diner was a long rectangle of chrome and glass on the edge of the airfield, the sort of place that still smelled faintly of jet fuel under the coffee. Rain streaked the windows in thin silver lines, blurring the lights from the hangar. The radio behind the counter hummed through static and then settled on a soft USO tune, Home Again, the kind of melody that curled around the heart before it faded. Henry Cole took the corner booth, his cap folded beside him. He spun the service coin across the tabletop. It rolled in a small circle, catching light from the neon clock. When it slowed, he stopped it with one finger, listening to the clatter of plates and the steady hiss of the coffee pot. A young man with wind-reddened cheeks stepped in, shook the water from his jacket, and scanned the room. Mr. Cole Henry looked up. "You're Leo Alvarez." "Yes, sir." Leo slid into the booth, breath fogging the window. "I'm with Airlift for Peace. We met at the Veteran Fair last month." Henry nodded. "You talked about rebuilding flight strips overseas." "Same idea," Leo said, leaning forward. "Except this time, right here. Mid-River's got the length, the grade. We could use it for emergency drops, maybe medical supplies when roads flood out. You'd just need to clean the top layer, paint the lines, and keep a tower light on." Henry smiled at the ambition in the kid's voice. "You know they're planning warehouses." "I read the permit." Leo shrugged. "But if we show them the field's still serviceable, get footage, a plan, they might change their mind." Henry turned the coin again. "Footage, huh? In my day, proof meant shoe polish and a handshake." Leo laughed. "Now it means drone video and social tags. But the heart's the same. People want to see something lifted." Henry studied him. "You really think the town cares about liftoff?" "I think they remember more than they admit." Leo pointed toward the window. "Even covered in dust, that runway still lines up with true north. You can't fake that." The radio shifted into another verse. A waitress refilled their cups. The sound of rain softened the kind of hush that made conversation lean closer. Henry said quietly, "You ever wonder why some things survive while others don't?" Leo tilted his head. "Because someone decides to keep them." The answer sat in the space between them. Henry rubbed his thumb over the coin's worn edge. "When we built this place, we carved grooves deep enough to hold meaning. Guess that's why the cracks don't scare me much." Leo grinned. "So you're in?" Henry chuckled under his breath. "In what?" "In helping me prove the runway's still alive." He lifted his cup. "Kid, I've been proving that my whole life." Outside, a gust pushed the rain sideways, streaking the glass until the lights from the old field blurred into gold smudges. They sat without speaking, just watching. The wind pressed against the windows like a restless thing. Henry finally said, "You hear that out there?" Leo paused. "Just wind." Henry's eyes softened. "It still wants to fly." For a moment neither moved. The radio hummed, the clock ticked, and a waitress wiped down the counter, humming along to the tune. Leo tapped the notebook in his pocket. "We'll need measurements, footage, maybe an interview." "Tomorrow?" Henry nodded slowly. "Tomorrow." He pushed the coin toward the center of the table. It spun again, wobbling before it settled. "If the sky still waits," Henry said, "we'll find a way back up." The rain hadn't stopped since dawn. It ran down the office window in long slanted lines, blurring the parking lot lights into ribbons of white. The ceiling fan turned slow circles above the planning desk, pushing stale air around a room that smelled faintly of ink and wet coats. Elaine Porter, head of Mid-River's zoning department, tapped her pen against a folder stamped with the red word, "Denied." She didn't look up when Henry Cole and Leo Alvarez entered. "I've read your proposal twice," she said. "It's a lovely idea, but the council already allocated that parcel." Henry removed his cap water droplets, tracing the wrinkles in his hand. "We're not talking about a parcel," he said. "We're talking about a runway that carried sons home." "You can't zone out meaning," Elaine sighed. "Meaning doesn't balance budgets, Mr. Cole." Leo set a rolled blueprint on the table. "Ma'am, we're offering volunteer labor, recycled materials, minimal cost. All we need is permission to clear the top layer. That surface has structural cracks," Elaine said. "And even if you repair them, the county has environmental restrictions." "I can't sign off." Henry's voice stayed even. "When you pave over memory, you pave over proof that people cared." Elaine met his eyes, steady but not cruel. "This isn't personal." Everything built by hand is personal, he said. Every inch of that field was laid by people who thought peace had a landing place. The fan creaked above them. Rain ticked against glass, sharper now. Leo unrolled the drawing, spreading it carefully. The plan showed supply paths, drop points, a modest hangar marked Peace Hub. The ink shimmered faintly under the fluorescent light. Elaine turned the folder toward them. The stamp says what it says. Henry looked down at the red word again, then at the service coin he'd placed beside it. The coin caught the reflection of the neon sign flickering outside, half the word cafe, blinking half dark. "They think memories don't earn rent," he said softly. Leo's reply came just as low. "Then let's show them what they build on." Elaine hesitated, her fingers resting on the edge of the paper. "You have spirit," she said, "but spirit doesn't rewrite policy." Henry picked up the coin, feeling its familiar weight. "No," he said, "but it can remind policy who it serves." For a long moment, no one spoke. The fan groaned again, the rain thinning into a slow patter. Elaine closed the folder with care, not victory. "If you want to appeal, the clerk's office is open till 5. Appellate won't listen to men my age," Henry said, turning for the door. "But maybe they'll listen to a picture." Leo gathered the blueprints, rolling them tight. "Tomorrow we'll bring one." Outside, the rain eased into mist. The parking lot glistened streetlights, carving narrow runways of white across the pavement. Henry paused at the door, watching them shimmer. "They deny what they can't see," Leo said. "Then we'll make it visible," Henry replied. A single drop of water traced down the glass a thin, bright line, like a landing path cutting through the night. The coin gleamed in his palm, the reflection bending light into motion. "Tomorrow," Henry said quietly, "we fly a camera instead of a plane." The morning wind came sharp off the flats, carrying the scent of oil gravel and the faint sweetness of rain-soaked grass. The sky hung low, but bright pale blue between the thinning clouds. Henry Cole stood near the center of the old runway, sleeves-rolled boots, powdered with chalk dust. Around him, volunteers marked chalk lines along the cracked surface, their voices scattered like birds in the open air. The drone's propellers started up a steady hum that built into rhythm. Leo Alvarez held the controller, eyes squinting into sunlight. "Cameras live," he said. "We're taking it from 20 feet slow, pass east to west." Henry nodded. "Keep her steady. Let the field show what's left." The little craft rose, the wind rushing past its blades. Below, the runway unfolded in its full, scarred length, patches of moss lines, worn thin edges overtaken by grass. Yet from the air, the cracks shaped themselves into strokes of white, faint and deliberate. The letters began to form, P-E-A-C-E. "Hold that angle," Henry murmured. Leo adjusted the controller. The screen brightened, the image sharpened into view. "You're seeing this?" Henry smiled faintly. "I see it." A small group gathered near the truck's construction workers who'd paused their shift, a few locals drawn by curiosity, and at the edge, Elaine Porter coat collar turned up against the breeze. She watched silently as the drone hovered and descended. "Looks like someone signed the Earth," one of the men said. Leo laughed softly. "Took 70 years to spell one word right." The medical van they'd borrowed from the clinic idled at the far end. Henry waved it forward. "Let's make it official," he said. "Ease down the corridor." 2 volunteers guided the driver cones, marking a narrow path of clean concrete. The van rolled ahead, tires whispering over the worn surface. It moved past the chalk lines and through the center of the word, the white letters gleaming under the drone's lens. The camera caught it all, the broken airfield reborn as a road to mercy. Elaine stepped closer. "You can't plan this into a permit," she said quietly. "No," Henry replied. "But you can let it remind you what permission looks like." She looked up at the drone circling overhead, the whir fading into a steady heartbeat in the sky. "You're serious about keeping this running?" "As long as it helps someone," Henry said. Leo turned the drone for a wide shot. "Sun's clearing," he said. "Let's get the reflection off the wet lines." The wind shifted. The cracks glittered like veins of silver. The letters stood bright and whole against the dark pavement. Someone began to clap, slow at first, then others joined a rising murmur that carried through the air. Elaine's eyes filled. She wiped them quickly. "You'll need a maintenance plan," she said. Henry smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." "You'll still need approval," she added, voice steady but soft. "Tomorrow," he said, "the town votes." The crowd quieted. The drone lowered, landing beside them with a sigh of spinning blades. The wind stilled for a moment, caught between laughter and silence. Henry slipped the service coin from his pocket, rubbed the edge once, and looked down the runway, no longer a ruin, but a promise written in concrete. The breeze rose again, lifting dust in a soft arc. Somewhere behind them, a child's voice called out, "It says peace," and for the first time in years, the airfield sounded alive. The next afternoon, the town gathered by the hangar, the air thick with the smell of fresh paint and rain-warmed asphalt. A small speaker crackled, the mayor's voice rising over the chatter and the tap of hammers from the crew tightening the last signs into place. By council vote, he read, "This site will be designated as the Mid-River Peace Missions Runway. From war ruins to runways for peace missions dedicated to those who built, served, and believed in return flights." Applause spread through the crowd, uneven but genuine. Henry stood near the fence, hands in his jacket pockets, the service coin clicking softly against a screwdriver he still carried out of habit. Behind him, volunteers loaded small crates marked medical aid onto the back of a white van. Each box bore the same blue insignia Leo had painted from the drone footage, 5 letters spaced across the lid, PEACE. The air smelled faintly of soap and diesel. Leo jogged over, clipboard in hand. The first supply runs mapped clinic up north. 15 minutes up, drop-off, 15 back. Henry smiled. Short flight, long meaning. A low hum rippled through the field as a single-engine plane turned onto the runway, its propeller flashing in the sunlight. The crowd quieted. The pilot lifted a hand in salute before pushing the throttle. The little aircraft rolled forward, rose, briefly circled, then touched down again, just a symbolic run, but enough to make the fresh paint gleam under its shadow. "That's your proof of life," Leo said, shading his eyes. Henry nodded. "Proof of purpose, too." Elaine Porter stood beside them now, coat open, wind tugging at her hair. "Sometimes peace," she said, "needs a mechanic." Henry gave a small laugh. "And sometimes a planner brave enough to change the blueprint." The radio from the mayor's truck picked up a live broadcast. Local volunteers completed the first stage of restoration. The Mid-River Peace Missions runway opens to community service flights this week. Hammer taps echoed behind the voices, steady, rhythmic, almost musical. The sound carried across the runway, bouncing off the hangar doors. Henry looked down at the white paint stretching past his boots, a new center line drawn straight through the cracks of the old pavement. He traced it with his gaze until it vanished into the horizon. The surface gleamed where sunlight met wet spots, silver bleeding into white. For the first time, the field didn't look tired. It looked useful. The wind eased. A cheer rose and drifted away, soft as a tide pulling back. Henry slipped a hand into his pocket, feeling the coin again, tapping it once in rhythm with the hammering still echoing down the strip. He breathed out slow and full. "Veterans Day tomorrow," he said quietly, almost to himself. The plane circled once more overhead, the sunlight flashing off its wings like a blessing. The morning light came in pale gold, brushing across the new white lines of the runway. The town was still quiet. Flags along the fence fluttered softly, and a faint hymn drifted from a nearby radio, something about coming home. Henry Cole walked slowly down the center of the airstrip, each step echoing against the concrete that once carried noise and smoke, now carrying only wind. Near the midpoint stood a fresh bronze plaque mounted on a short pedestal of smooth stone. The inscription read, "Mid-River Peace Missions. Runway from war ruins to runways for peace." He paused before it, the brim of his cap shading his eyes. He reached into his pocket and drew out the service coin, its edges worn smooth from 50 years of handling. He turned it once between his fingers, feeling the faint engraving the way it caught the sun. The radio hymn faded to static, replaced by the soft buzz of a drone lifting into the air. Leo Alvarez stood a few yards back, camera pointed, recording quietly. Henry didn't look at him. He knelt beside the plaque and pressed the coin into the wet patch of sealing cement at its base. "For all the runways that never came back," he said, voice low but steady. "Then softer runways for peace." The wind hushed. The drone hovered, its lens glinting. Leo's voice carried faintly. "Hold still, Henry. That's perfect." Henry smiled. "Make sure they see the cracks, too." That's where the light gets in. The drone pulled upward, capturing the entire stretch, the white lines, the plaque, the man standing beside it. Sunlight poured down the concrete, washing the surface in silver. The service coin gleamed like a tiny star caught between earth and sky. Henry straightened, dusting his hands. He looked up as the drone drifted higher until it was only a bright speck against the wide blue. For a moment, the sound of its blades merged with the wind, steady, patient rising. He closed his eyes, letting the light settle over him, and whispered, "The sky takes off again." The drone climbed until the runway disappeared into a single shining line, a scar made whole leading back into the horizon.